Why stability often delays financial progress. Most people believe financial stability is the goal. A steady job, a predictable paycheck, bills paid on time, life under control. And for a while, that stability feels like relief. But here's a question almost no one asks while things are fine. If everything is stable, why does progress still feel so slow? Why does earning more not translate into freedom? Why does life feel just as tight, just as busy, just as dependent on next month's paycheck as it did years ago? The uncomfortable truth is this. Stability doesn't always move you forward. Very often, it keeps you exactly where you are. Not because stability is bad, but because it's quietly convincing you that there's no urgency to change. And that's how financial progress gets delayed for years without anyone noticing. For many people in the US and the UK, financial life looks acceptable on paper. There is a job, income is predictable, bills are paid on time. There is no emergency forcing immediate action. And because nothing is obviously wrong, stability starts to feel like success. This is where the real problem begins. Stability creates the illusion of progress. When life is functioning, people assume they're moving forward, even if nothing meaningful is actually improving. Income may rise slowly over time, but flexibility does not. Time still feels tight. Taking a break feels risky. Changing direction feels irresponsible. Every decision is quietly filtered through one requirement. Everything must keep working exactly as it is. Most people in this position are not failing financially. They are maintaining, and maintenance can be deceptively demanding. The paycheck arrives, but it is already spoken for. Expenses are fixed. Responsibilities are locked in. Life requires constant consistency just to stay in place. There is no margin for mistakes, no room to slow down, and very little space to think long-term. What makes this especially dangerous is that stability rarely triggers reflection. There is no clear signal that something needs to change. No dramatic failure, no urgent pressure, just a steady routine that absorbs years without improving how free or resilient life actually feels. This is why so many people feel stuck without understanding why. They are not falling behind in a visible way. They are simply standing still while time keeps moving. Stability becomes a holding pattern, quietly delaying financial progress not because people are careless, but because life feels manageable enough to avoid deeper questions. And that is the core issue worth recognizing early. The reason stability so often delays financial progress has very little to do with laziness, lack of ambition, or poor decision-making. In most cases, it comes from how people are taught to define success, safety, and responsibility from an early age. For most of their lives, people are trained to avoid problems rather than position for growth. Get a stable job, pay your bills, don't fall behind. As long as nothing breaks, you're told you're doing fine. This creates a mindset where stability itself becomes the goal. Instead of being a foundation for something better, progress is measured by the absence of trouble, not by the presence of flexibility. Another root cause is how predictable income affects the brain. A steady paycheck provides immediate psychological relief, even if the situation isn't ideal. It's known. That familiarity feels safe. The brain prefers predictable discomfort over uncertain improvement, especially when responsibilities are involved. As a result, people choose paths that feel secure in the short term, even when those paths quietly limit future options. There's also a structural issue most people never examine. When income is tightly linked to time and availability, stability actually increases dependence. The system works only if effort continues without interruption. Stop working, and everything is threatened. But because this risk is invisible during calm periods, it goes unrecognized. Stability feels like protection, when in reality it often concentrates risk instead of reducing it. Finally, social reinforcement plays a role. Stable choices are praised. Consistency is rewarded. Questioning a secure path can look irresponsible, even when it's thoughtful. Over time, people internalize the idea that maintaining what works is wiser than experimenting with change. Together, these forces turn stability into a quiet delay, not because it's wrong, but because it's rarely examined. If stability can quietly delay financial progress, the solution isn't to abandon it or take reckless risks. Real progress doesn't come from blowing up your life. It comes from changing how stability is used. Most people treat stability as an end goal. A steady job, predictable income, and familiar routines become something to protect at all costs. A more effective approach is to treat stability as a resource. Stability isn't meant to keep you comfortable forever. It's meant to give you room to build. The first shift is changing how decisions are evaluated. Instead of asking, "Does this keep me safe right now?" the better question is, "Does this reduce my dependence on things staying exactly the same?" A decision that slightly increases short-term discomfort but creates more flexibility over time is often safer than one that locks you into a rigid structure. This shows up clearly in how income is handled. When every increase in income is immediately absorbed into higher fixed costs, stability tightens instead of expands. Redirecting even small portions of income toward optionality changes that dynamic. Skills that can travel with you. Investments that grow without daily effort. Buffers that reduce urgency. None of these feel exciting, but they quietly lower pressure. Another key shift is separating activity from progress. Being busy feels productive, but busyness often just maintains the present. Progress is structural. It's measured by how resilient your life becomes if circumstances change. When you begin optimizing for resilience instead of comfort, priorities naturally adjust. The goal isn't speed, it's direction. Stability becomes powerful when it's used to build flexibility, not when it's used to avoid discomfort. The long-term cost of stability doesn't show up quickly. That delay is exactly why so many people underestimate it. In the early years, stability feels like progress. Life becomes predictable, income is reliable, stress feels manageable. From the outside, everything appears to be working. But over time, something subtle begins to happen. When stability is never challenged, flexibility slowly disappears. Income becomes fully committed to fixed costs. Time gets pre-allocated before it even arrives. Career paths narrow, not because of failure, but because change starts to feel expensive. Each year makes adjustment harder than the last. This is how many people end up earning more than ever, yet feeling more constrained, not trapped by debt or disaster, but by structure. Life depends on everything continuing exactly as it is. Any disruption, a job change, health issue, or economic shift, feels threatening because there's no margin to absorb it. By contrast, when stability is used intentionally, the long-term experience looks very different. Progress often feels slower at first. There are fewer visible wins and less external validation, but pressure compounds in the opposite direction. Fixed costs stay manageable. Skills deepen, assets grow quietly, income becomes less fragile. Over time, decisions feel lighter. You gain the ability to pause without panic. Time starts to feel like something you manage, not something you constantly sell. This is where discipline matters more than intensity. Small, consistent decisions shape outcomes far more than dramatic moves ever could. Financial freedom, in this sense, isn't about escaping work or avoiding responsibility. It's about reducing how fragile your life becomes as time passes. And that's the difference stability either protects or quietly prevents. Stability is not the enemy of financial progress, but misunderstanding what stability is for can quietly hold you back for years. Most people don't get stuck because they make reckless decisions. They get stuck because they make careful ones, consistently. Choices that feel responsible, paths that feel sensible, routines that feel safe. Over time, those decisions form a structure that works, but only as long as nothing changes. And that's the part many people miss. True financial progress isn't about constantly chasing more income or forcing bold moves. It's about noticing whether your current stability is expanding your options or quietly narrowing them. Whether it gives you room to adjust, pause, and choose, or whether it simply keeps everything running exactly as it is. The difference doesn't show up overnight. It shows up years later, in how heavy life feels, in how difficult it is to change direction, in how much pressure exists beneath the surface of a life that looks successful from the outside. The people who gain real financial freedom aren't usually the ones who felt confident early on. They're the ones who questioned sooner, who paid attention while life was still manageable, who used stability as a foundation to build flexibility, instead of treating it as the final goal. This isn't about rejecting comfort or security. It's about asking better questions while you still have choices. About recognizing that progress doesn't always feel exciting, and that sometimes the most important shifts happen quietly, without applause. So here's the question to leave you with. Does your current stability make your future feel lighter or heavier? And what's one safe decision in your life that might be protecting comfort today, but limiting flexibility tomorrow? Share your thoughts in the comments. That's often where awareness begins, and where real change quietly starts.